what I thought I might do is just share briefly from one little section of this new book. I keep plugging this book to augment the huge payment I'm receiving for giving this presentation here today.
Yes.
No, this is a
Yes.
group I love to connect with. So, but it is the fruit of the book mentioned earlier was my first struggle as a practicing Christian to sort out what's happening because it happened to me as a Christian. And so what's going on here? And like others have exclaimed, I could find really not much, uh, certainly at the usual parish level or the common level where most Christians experience teaching and so forth. I was familiar with our mystical tradition. I'm a Roman Catholic, and so I found some hints of that there, but also had to do some deeper digging and have come up through the years of dialogue and really listening to many people, reading many books on the topic with a perspective on how we might understand this in the context of Christian spirituality and theology and anthropology. And that's what I present in this book. My own process, as I said, goes back to the mid 1980s. So we're almost to have our 40th anniversary of Kundalini. And it does get better unless I screw up and make it worse. And I can say without a doubt that almost every time I'm having a rough time now, it's my fault. I watch a movie that I know this is going long. I start to feel things happening, but I want to see how it ends. And I might have two or three bad days after that, but I know I'll get over it. It'll straighten out somehow. Or I'm reading a book and it's engrossing, and I can tell when I should stop, and most times I step away, but sometimes I push a little too hard and I pay consequences. It's like there's instant karma, isn't there, with Kundalini stuff. So this is from a section on the book about lifestyle changes, because it seems to me that's a common theme that I heard among us is our ongoing struggle with Kundalini to find a lifestyle that works. Now I'm going to use a couple of terms in here that have other meanings in that have let me say that differently. When I use the term pneuma, it's a Greek word for spirit. It's really roughly equivalent to prana. Those of you who are, let's say, more familiar with the Hindu teaching, or chi, if you're working out of a Zenish or Buddhist tradition, or ki, a Japanese tradition, or ruach, the Jewish. I think these are all describing an experience of kind of a bioenergy, the stuff we feel pushing around in us with Kundalini, the stuff that gets blocked, the stuff that feels wonderful when it breaks through and finally goes to where it's supposed to go. So I'm using the term pneuma for that because Christians are going to be scared, many of them, by prana. They'll be terrified of chi. But pneuma, oh, that's the term St. Paul used. So good, use pneuma. I can live with that. And the other one is dynamic ground. I will mention the term dynamic ground, which is a reference to a place deep within us where we receive our existence moment by moment from the divine. So it's kind of this deep, sometimes people call it the inner spark, where our existence emerges moment by moment. There's nothing prior to that, So sometimes in meditation, we can experience ourselves connected at that very deep level. It's deeper than thought. It's probably as we approach that level where Kundalini lights and things begin to happen, I know some of you have probably experienced that. It can be quite beautiful and captivating. And the other one is apophatic. I think you all have experienced apophatic practice. They're basically in Christian spirituality, two broad categories of practice, cataphatic and apophatic. Cataphatic is using words, symbols, stuff, creation, encountering God through the medium of created stuff. So the divine is mediated. The other one is apophatic, which is without symbols, without words. It's what many people are trying to do with their meditation. They're trying to go beyond that or beneath that. In Christianity, that would be called contemplative practice. And you can come to times where, lo and behold, you're aware only that you're aware. You're not present to yourself through a thought or anything. You're just simply present. You all know what I'm talking about there? I'm sure you have. Kundalini seems like it pulls us toward that kind of experience, experiences of deep silence. Okay, so pneuma and dynamic ground and apophatic. Okay,
Phil, how do you spell apophatic? Is it
APO, it's a Greek word, APOPHATIC,
Okay, thank you.
apophatic, apophatic. Yeah, and the book also speaks of a Kundalini dynamic, that what we're experiencing with Kundalini activation or awakening is the intensification of something that's already there, kind of moving, pushing slowly, growing us. You could use the chakra metaphor as a way of talking about ascending the chakras, of awakening more and more fully to our human potential and its embodiment as well, not just in a spiritual sense, a disembodied spirituality, but an embodied spirituality, working slowly and living a moral life, living a balanced life, living a healthy life, really allows this Kundalini dynamic. Some people would call it a slow burn, or, William James would call it once born religious experience. Now, Kundalini awakening is like the shifting gears of that. This dynamic that's at work in a really slow level becomes like a volcano that erupts. Well, you see, volcanoes are active. There's a little bit of smoke coming out, right? But every now and then they flare up. And when they do, it's a whole new ballgame for everybody living in that area. And it seems like a Kundalini activation or awakening, if you want to use that term, is like that. So, during the early days of Kundalini activation, many have a very difficult time carrying on with business as usual. Anybody relate to that so far?
Nah.
Yeah. Work that requires mental focus and intellectual analysis will be especially stressful, as will casual conversations. Sometimes fluorescent lighting is annoying. I couldn't stand it. Background music, such as found in some workplaces, can seem distasteful. Junk food doesn't sit well. Alcohol might cause, where am I? Alcohol might cause severe mood swings, and TV is bothersome. In other words, it really messed with my life so far. Even if one has been diligent about living a healthy lifestyle before the activation, there will be stressors. Oftentimes, one cannot read much, not even focus on spirituality. Any kind of mental concentration stirs things up within, often uncomfortably so. I was such an avid reader before Kundalini, and afterwards I'd read like a paragraph and I was done.
Yep.
I mean, done. And it wasn't that I knew everything that was in that book. It was like, you may not read another word without having serious consequences, young man. Close that book. Okay? The cause of these difficulties is largely related to intensified pneuma, prana, and the extraordinary demands this places on the psyche and organism part of our being, at least for a while. Intensified pneuma is extremely sensitive to mental stimulation within oneself and from others. This is not all bad, as it helps one become more aware of the formative power of thoughts, that we might become more responsible at this level. We're going to have to learn to be responsible for the thoughts we hang on to. And that's hard work. Energy follows attention, and thought forms attention. So the integration of energy and attention entails hard work at the level of thought. And this is not easy when one is being bombarded by a wide range of thoughts, mental stimulation from various sources. I've shared this little story with Kate before. I've often thought of early Kundalini activation as a situation similar to that which crustaceans face during their life cycle. Animals like crabs and crawfish have an exoskeleton which they need to shed several times during their lives to accommodate their growing bodies. During the interim between shedding the old shell and growing a new one, they are very, very vulnerable and usually hide out to avoid prey. Eventually, when their new shell hardens a bit, they can resume normal life. Something like this is a good idea during early activation as well, if one can do so. A lifestyle that is quiet, simple, with few stressors and demands is ideal. Often, as was my situation, this is impossible. So one carries on as well as possible. I was an alcohol and drug abuse counselor doing multifamily therapy with newborns in the house. Yeah. So come home from the frying pan to the fire every day.
Oh my gosh.
And so, try to find a little time for some quiet and all of that. In time, and again, this is my experience, and again, dialoguing with a lot of people who pretty much attest the same, and I'm anxious to hear your thoughts. The process itself is our best teacher. We learn what foods are helpful and which are not, how much time to spend in prayer and meditation, how much TV we can watch, and what are the signals when we are approaching excessive reading and so forth. But in almost every case I've ever come across, the general tendency is to live a simpler, quieter lifestyle with more time for spiritual practice, walks in nature, and the pursuit of enjoyable hobbies. A healthy diet, exercise, and good sleep are also necessary. Some websites provide extensive information on herbs and other supplements that help. Maybe you have experience with that. I think that can be helpful. Few people have told me they cannot stand to be in a city beyond a few days before becoming depleted of energy. Perhaps the pollution, noise, or some other subtle energetic factors are at work. A real hardship. Travel to visit family and friends can be an ordeal. As one is taken out of one stabilizing lifestyle and plunged into another environment where, generally, people do not pray and where there's going and doing from morning until night, often with the TV on, music in the background, idle chatter, and so forth. Kind of a little taste of hell, I believe.
Yeah.
Some adjust by trying to carve out their own space in the guest room where they stay or by renting a hotel room. That's what I do now. I have often used the excuse of needing time and space to avoid a migraine, and others accept it. And it is, in fact, the truth. It is not easy, for relationships with family and friends are important and require personal investments of time and energy, even sacrifices. All of which is to say that there were very good reasons why Kundalini process was something of an occult science in Hinduism for many centuries. This was not something for ordinary people to pursue. The ashram or monastery provided an ideal setting for developing a foundation and supporting integration. It is also why, in Christianity, apophatic practices, these are the quiet, beyond words, contemplative practices, were not encouraged for ordinary lay people such as they are today. It was recognized that all sorts of fireworks could arise as a consequence of this kind of spirituality, and that a monastery or religious community could help to deal with this. Alas, now there are a plethora of books on apophatic spirituality, and many people take them up without first establishing a proper inner foundation through cataphatic prayer, study, and the pursuit of virtue. These are the hardest Kundalini cases to deal with, but they are not beyond God's power to resolve. What needs to be emphasized most strongly is that anyone undertaking apophatic spiritual practices ought to be under the guidance of a spiritual director to help discern what's going on, when to back off, when one is being called to go deeper, and so forth. It would also be great if spiritual directors knew more about Kundalini activation, but that is not always the case. And there is an international organization called Spiritual Directors International. I have on several occasions offered to do a workshop, one of these breakouts at their uh, annual convention, and it's never been accepted. And I've done a few for spiritual directors, and most of them don't know about Kundalini. They would, as some of you said, think maybe it's some sort of psychopathology, borderline, some sort of, you know, medical problem is developing. Uh, so it would help if those who were supposed to be giving people spiritual direction and guidance knew a little something about it. So that's one of the reasons that's motivated me as a spiritual director to write about my own experience and to try to share it on the internet and books and so forth with others. So that's just one small section from the book. Um, the lifestyle struggles that people who have Kundalini undergo. And it can, for many people, be a very, you know, quick change in their lifestyle needs, where people who were once like really active all of a sudden discover they just can't do much. I know people who had to quit their jobs. They just couldn't do their job anymore. They needed some time away, and sometimes their job wasn't waiting for them when they came back. So I throw all that out there and would welcome anything that's touched off with you, or if you want to take it all in a different direction, feel free to ask questions, make comments, and just raise your hand a la Zoom etiquette to so we don't all talk at once.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. That was like, I just, your words, the way you write and the way you speak to this experience is just so relatable. I mean, I think everybody here is like just nodding with, like, even just something like the family visits. It's like, you have to visit family. You love your family, and yet you can't. Like, my dad visited this weekend, and I was like, you need to go immediately. But then he left, and I was like, I love you, and you're gonna die soon. Like, it's just the whole, like, gamut in one moment. It really is paradoxical and yeah, just
Yeah. Yes,
so.
it can be very difficult. Yes, right.
And yeah, I know a number of people here can relate to, like, going into cities, and even just some of the conversations we've had recently, like in the last couple of days in our community about grocery stores and cities, and yeah.